Hello everybody, Thomas here, and welcome back to SFF180. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, it's a great pleasure to have you here. You know, it has been quite a while since I have done one of these editorial videos, and I thought it might be time to do it. I thought it might be time to spruce up the channel a bit with a little bit more variety of content going on here, more than just mailbag review, right? That gets a bit tedious. And so if you've been watching my channel for any amount of time, and if you're familiar with my website, well then you know that I have been at this science fiction fantasy book reviewing gig for quite some time, 15 years. Doesn't seem nearly that long, but there it is. And people have been very complimentary to me about my reviewing, my style of reviewing, and that's been incredibly gratifying. Authors, editors, you know, I've gotten praise from a lot of really nice folks, as well as my new friends and colleagues that I've met in the last few years I've been doing Booktube. It's been very, very gratifying. I appreciate it very much. And so I thought to myself, well, maybe there are some tips and some pointers and some lessons that I have learned in this decade and a half in the trenches. I mean, right? I'm obviously a fount of wisdom about these things, right? I mean, look at this face. See, this is a wise, trustworthy face. See, obviously, I'm a guy who knows what I'm talking about when it comes to book reviewing. You can trust me. And, you know, since Booktube is a growing community, more and more people who are watching their favorite booktubers, their favorite channels, are thinking to themselves, maybe I could pick up a camera and do this myself. Well, I thought I might offer a couple of tips and tricks and things that I have learned in all of these years. So I guess to talk about reviewing generally, what is a book review? Let's start with that. That's pretty basic. What is a book review? And more importantly, what is a book review not? Right, so I imagine we all have some memories of being in 8th grade, 9th grade, junior high, early high school, being in English class, getting a reading assignment, and then based on that reading assignment, we have to do a book report, right? That was an assignment that a lot of us had, and book reports were usually very simple, very basic and rudimentary. You would maybe do a paragraph or two, very short, describing the plot, giving a brief synopsis, and then at the end you might say something along the lines of, you know, liking this or that character, or the writer's particular use of words, or ideas, various themes that you may have discussed, had class discussions about where the teacher essentially told you this is the theme. And so you would just put all of that down, and it would be very brief and really simple. Now that is a school book report, but when we're doing book reviews, we don't do book reports. So what's the difference? So for many years, one of the leading movie reviewers in the country, one of the leading film critics, was a woman who wrote for the New York Times called Pauline Kael, and she was brilliant. And she was paid one of the highest compliments by one of her colleagues that anyone could possibly pay, which is that they said, I would almost much rather read Pauline Kael's review of a movie than go see the movie. Okay, now that's pretty rare, right? That's a kind of a rarefied, level of impressing someone, I'll have to say that. But what this person was getting at was that Pauline Kael succeeded in sharing the film watching experience in a way that was as thrilling and as exciting and as immersive, and to this guy even more so. Reading a book, reading for pleasure, is like going to see a movie, or it's like going to do anything else that we love to do for pleasure, whether you're wandering around playing Pokemon Go, or you're hiking the Grand Canyon, or you're skydiving in the nude while playing Pokemon Go. Whatever it is you're into for pleasure, that is an experience, right? That is a purely emotional, deeply personal experience. And it's what we seek if we are lovers of reading, if we are lovers of novels and stories and other universes. The experience is what we're after. And if the experience is a really positive one, if it's one that impacts us powerfully, then when you write your review, in addition to some of the basic mechanics like, yeah, sure, what's it about, brief synopsis, names of characters, locale, things like that, what you are seeking to do, what you want to communicate is that experience. You want to make your reader feel what you felt. Now, everybody has their own personal style of how they like to do this kind of thing. I am not a particularly gushy person myself. You know, it's just not really my style. But even when I have those rare instances where a book is not merely good, but I think it's absolutely great, something like Binti or the Trader Brew Cormorant, my main goal in reviewing those works is to try to communicate the intensity, how that book impacted me, not just what it was about, not just how well it was written, not just its structure, but its power to move me personally. And by the same token, if I didn't like something, well, then I need to make that experience understood as well. You are communicating, I read this book and it was powerful. I read this book and it was joyous. I read this book and it made me laugh. I read this book and it made me weep. That is the experience of reading, and that is the experience that you need to convey in your review. And that's the difference between a review and a book report. But you remember what I said about what if you didn't like it? That is a thing. That often happens, okay? But remember that all you can do, your main duty to your reader, is to be honest at all times. Now, I get kind of a weird feeling in my brain whenever I hear some booktuber or see somebody on a blog say something like, I was sent a copy of this book in exchange for an honest review. Because that made it feel, it makes it sound like that's a thing that had to be transacted for. Now, that should never be the case. There should never be a circumstance under which you would ever write a dishonest review. You shouldn't need to say, yes, if you send me your book, I will give you an honest review. Well, implying what? Like if you had bought it at the store, you might lie about it? No, of course not. Honesty is always and only the policy. Ever. And this is absolutely the case for writing a bad review, which will happen. First thing about bad reviews, don't feel apologetic for them. Certainly, it's a pity when you read something and you didn't like it. Nobody wants to read something for pleasure and have it turn out to be not a pleasurable experience, right? But when you didn't like something, you have to be just as honest. You have to be scrupulously honest when you explain why, and you want to be thorough. From my own experience, I found that my negative reviews can sometimes be a bit more spoilery than my positive reviews, and so of course I have to be very, very careful to let people know that spoilers might happen. The reason for this is quite often when novels fail, it's usually because the author does something really lousy and screws up the climax. Endings are hard. And a lot of books that I've ended up not liking have usually shit the bed in those last 2 chapters. But I personally find it really incumbent upon myself to be that detailed and that thorough in explaining myself when I say why I did not like something. But the thing about having a negative opinion is that you are always going to have some, right? At some point you're going to read something that you don't like, and so when that happens, just own it, right? I see so many booktubers and so many novice reviewers just kind of tiptoeing nervously into a negative review like, oh, please don't hurt me, but you can't predict that. First off, it doesn't matter how thorough and careful and fair you try to be in a negative review is always going to piss somebody off, no matter what you do. Fall back on the honesty is the only policy thing, right? And by the way, I do have another video that I'm planning to follow up this one with, directed at readers, all about, negative reviews and how to deal with them, okay? So look for that. But what I'm saying to reviewers and to booktubers is, own it and be honest. But a negative review should never be personal, and that is where some reviews can go wrong, right? I just said wrong followed by right. It's that weird time of night for me, sorry. But when you write a negative review of a book, the most important thing to remember is that it is about the book. It should never be personal. You're not there to slag off the author. You're certainly not there to slag off the fan base. But there are reviewers who get this wrong. And lo and behold, wouldn't you know it, there happens to be a recent example of getting it wrong that I can point to. Over on a website that I'd never heard of before called Tess, a guy by the name of Joe Nutt went on this extended pompous brain fart in which he essentially used young adult literature as a means of deriding the entire millennial generation as subliterate morons who are being prevented from developing proper adult literacy levels and what have you. I am not going to go into big digression of the actual content of this amazingly stupid piece. Although it would be trivially easy to tear the thing about 8 new assholes, he makes arguments that are not the least bit coherent or rooted in any kind of logical thread that you can follow. It's just an extended old guy rant about these darn kids today and their dumb rock and roll and their crazy YA novels and how it's all stupid because how dare these young people, like the things they like and not the things he says they should like. So, it's not really a book review. It's one of these stupid online hot takes that the web is thoroughly poisoned with. But the point is, this is how all of the different ways, you can count all the different ways in which this runs antithetical to the whole notion of what book reviewing should be. It pretends to be about a certain category of literature when it's really just an excuse to rant about young people. So that right there is sort of violating the principle of it ain't personal. And the author shows absolutely no indication that he has bothered to learn the first thing about this particular form of literature that he is attacking. You remember about a year ago there was this idiot, Jonathan Jones, in The Guardian who slagged off Terry Pratchett while right there in his lead, the very first sentence of his article where he admitted that he hadn't even read any Terry Pratchett. Okay, well, at least he admitted that, right? At least Jonathan Jones admitted that he did not know what he was talking about right off. Didn't exactly make him any more intelligent, but at least he was honest. But Joe Nutt doesn't even do that, so he goes into an article evincing complete ignorance of his subject with the sole purpose of just slagging the people who love a thing that he doesn't think they should love. It's like, oh no, kids are having fun in ways in which I do not approve. To the Scoldmobile, Robin! Yeah, you can call that bullshit whatever you like, but it's not reviewing, it's not criticism, and it certainly isn't persuasive speaking, right? If there is literature that you think young audiences might be better off reading or might just do well to read, that might expand their minds and their life experiences, yeah, don't do it by saying, hey, dumbasses, don't read that crap, read this thing that I'm telling you to read. No, you encourage them. You build up a positive case for the literature that you do think is good. You don't do this negative thing of tearing people down. That's fundamentally the art of persuasion. But what about the academic types? What about, the experts in literature, the long-term critics who have published in all of the impressive journals? I mean, don't they have, to at least a certain degree, shouldn't we admit that there is a store of knowledge there? A real background that gives their opinions the weight of some authority? Well, maybe, but that's not necessary. If you're reviewing, if you're going to start a blog or start a Booktube channel and you're reviewing, not having that background doesn't automatically disqualify you. Again, we're reading for pleasure here. We're not preparing a fucking dissertation. For instance, reviewing science fiction. It can help to have enough background in reading science fiction, if you're going to be reviewing it, to know things, to know little details, like Joe Haldeman's The Forever War is a book that is in dialogue with Robert Heinlein's Starship Troopers, right? It is a book that is a response to the other book. Same way with Robert Heinlein's Tunnel in the Sky being a response to William Golding's The Lord of the Flies, right? This is literature in conversation with itself. That's all interesting to know, and if you have the benefit of that knowledge and insight, that can certainly make any review that you write where you're talking about this particular book or these particular trends in the genre pretty interesting to somebody who comes along and reads it. But it's not necessary, it's not required, and it doesn't mean your opinion's less valid just because you don't have that level of reading experience yet. On the one hand, you could say, yes, a person of a certain age has more overall life experience than a person of a much younger age, and so they might have the benefit of a few more years of worldly wisdom under their belts. But at the same time, myself being, a white guy of a certain age, you set me alongside a 20-year-old who is a person of color or a person from another country or culture entirely, they will still have an entirely different set of experiences that are going to inform their reading. And for me to think simply because, well, I'm older and I'm more mature or whatever, blah, 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 right? For me to think that I have nothing to learn from that person would be certainly very arrogant and ignorant on my part. Because all of us bring our life experiences, whether they're a whole host of life experiences or whether they're just a few life experiences, we all bring that to the reading that we do. And so our assessment of a work, our opinions, our judgments are going to be shaded by that. And indeed, criticism, like anything else, is a field that thrives when there is a variety of viewpoints being expressed. The minute you only have one acceptable interpretation or one acceptable set of criticisms for, a particular work of art means that, well, now freedom of choice and freedom of taste and freedom of distinction making has gone out the window. And finally, so that I'm not keeping you guys here all day long, just remember, writing is communication. It's an act of communication, and it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's a book review, or a novel, or a newspaper editorial, or even a tweet, right? You're just trying to communicate. You're trying to convey ideas, and you're trying to be persuasive. Not to say you expect everybody who reads your review to agree with your ideas, who reads anything that you write to agree with you all the time. They won't, but at least you want to make yourself understood, right? One of the best compliments I can possibly get as a reviewer is when someone says to me, and they have, I didn't agree with that review you wrote, but at least I understood where you were coming from. My job is done. And so don't be forced. Be yourself, be who you are, communicate clearly, confidently. It's just like you're talking to your friends about your favorite books. And hopefully, with some of these ideas under your belt, you'll go on to find reading as pleasurable a long-term commitment hobby as I have. I hope you do. And I can't wait to share some reviews with you guys and hear yours. All right? So I want to thank all of you for joining me. Thank you so much. I love having you here. I love the support that you are giving the channel. Please like if you enjoyed watching, share the video far and wide with all your SFF reading friends, and above all, please subscribe if you have not done so. That is what helps SFF180 grow. as a channel. And until I see all you lovely people next time, happy reviewing!